All right, we heard from Pete Carroll today. A couple of interesting things. I think the one that most people will be taking note of is the injury to Red Bryant in his foot. Didn't practice today, questionable for the game. And what's interesting about that is this team has had some trouble with the run, stopping the run, and he's been a big part of that in the past. And we were talking about it on the air and off the air about where he's kind of been. Feels like he's been sort of anonymous out there a little bit, and maybe it has to do with the injury. But you also talked about real subtle movements in the way these guys are filling the gaps or how they're supposed to fill it, and it's hard to do. Just speaking of it, but now you've got the visual.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can use the hand motions and everything, but I'll also first read my disclaimer that I don't have the script in my hand. I don't know whose responsibility is what, but in general, as far as the run fits or the gaps or whatever, gap responsibility, sometimes they call it gap integrity, just has to do with, the A gap is between the center and the guard. It's that space, but, you can't let that space get too big, okay? So even if you have the A gap taken care of, you go up there, you get yourself in a position where you can make a tackle on a running back, and with a guy blocking you, you're on the right side of him, so it's like I'm here, there's another guy between this guy and the next guy, okay, and so that's how it wants to be all the way across the board. So there's no time where you have two offensive players, linemen together, right? Because then you have a hallway, right? There's no defensive player in the way there. So, but even with everybody in the gap and fulfilling their responsibility, if you allow the gap to get too wide, if you don't squeeze it, you hear coaches talking about squeezing down the gap. So, if Brady, who's filming here, comes up to block me, I can't just go up and hit him and just go anywhere. I got to squeeze and constrict down that gap. And same thing with the tackle on the other side. If he has the opposite A gap, which is on the other side of it, even though he has that gap over there, he's got to squeeze it this way. And so what's happening is you're just kind of getting a little bit of extra push by the offense in the Miami game, where they're just, even though they had somebody in that gap, they were just pushed apart a little bit. And in the NFL, you only need a couple feet.
And you talked about just that brief moment where maybe you're engaged with a guy, and rather than look outside, he looks inside for a second. Maybe that's part of the trying too hard, or hey, I have a potential to make a play here. And in that split second of him looking the other direction, just that much, somebody gets to the outside.
Oh, and that's all it takes, And in the NFL, it's just one split-second mistake, and they take advantage of it. But yeah, there was an instance with a defensive end over the weekend that, had the perfect position, great feet, gets his hand. You always want to get the blocker off you. You hit him and then get the blocker away from your body, and he has that outside position, so the blocker's here and his head's out here in case the guy tries to run outside. He kind of sniffs inside, sticks his head inside for 1 second, because the running back made a move, and that was all it took, and then he was out and around the corner and off to the races. So yeah, it's just all about, and you mentioned doing too much. It's like when I say he sniffed inside, what he did was he tried to go do somebody else's job. Your job is to stay outside. Stay outside. My son was home over Thanksgiving, and we were watching a game, and he's like, "Dad, I can't tell you how many times I've heard you scream that at the." I'm always like, "Stay outside." Used to drive me nuts when I was coaching football in high school too, but yeah, especially in the NFL, because there's so much space outside the hash marks. All the plays happen in the middle of the field. You really got to be protective of that space, the lateral space to the sidelines.
There you go. Football education with Dave Wyman. Gap integrity.